Okay, we're recording.
All right, great. Well, great to have everyone here. I see we have several folks from the class on the call, which is good. My name is Carey Dukes. I'm the professor for this semester. And Michael Hughes, who's a representative of SCM Globe, is on the call as well. He's part of the developmental team that built this program and was kind enough to give us a session and a time for you guys to ask questions if you've already been playing with it. We are doing the Cincinnati seasoning case for the first pass, and so I'm hopeful that you guys have been in a little bit and been playing with it and have some two-point questions to ask. But the purpose of this call is to really just kind of get you familiar with the tool and to provide you a platform to ask questions if you have any that have come up, and if not, he'll show you where the tutorials are, the FAQs are, where some of the things and some of the pieces have already been put out there for you to look for questions that come up over and over again. This tool is very valuable. I went through it last semester with Michael. I like the way it lays out the graphics and the visual perspective of the supply chain. And so much of a supply chain is done in your head a lot of times, and this tool actually allows you to see not only to see the mathematical implications of your decisions, but the visual implications of those decisions. And that's what I like about it. So I'm confident, for those of you who heard our conversation earlier, if you have questions or concerns throughout the semester, we're going to have a little bit of a different format for this project as we go, where we're going to do some weekly or every 2 weeks, calls with myself and you. So if you have questions about both the project of Cincinnati seasoning as well as the final project, Milledgeville Mittens, you can ask those questions and we can work on problems and not get to the final exam project where you're doing the deck and then you show me stuff that makes absolutely no sense. So I'm sure none of y'all will do that this semester, so we won't have those conversations. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Michael, and again, if you would like, if you could type questions that you have so we can see them, and then I'll kind of sequence them for you, Michael, and you could just do a quick demo, and then we'll sequence the questions as we go.
All right. Well, Carey, thank you for that introduction. And like Carey said, just type them into the chat box. Interrupt me when I start to go too fast or when I jump over things or any little nagging feeling that you're not understanding things, just ask questions. So the first thing to do when you get your account is from the home screen, this blue button that says Start Here. You can also get at when you're already inside of the application. But I can't overemphasize if you take 15 to 30 minutes to go through the Getting Started section and read the FAQs, you will be good to go. And if you just jump in and don't go through that, it'll be like stumbling around in a room with the lights off. You're going to be bumping into things. You're going to get angry. Then you're not going to like my software, and we really want you to like the software. So, and we are going into our 6th year now, and so the user interface and the functionality of the software has been continuously improved and refined based on feedback. Our motto is that we want the software to be intuitively obvious, which means that it becomes transparent. Very quickly you get how to use it. So you use your brain power on solving the supply chain problems, not on hassling with the software. So that is the intent. The software should be easy, but the supply chain challenges will be challenging. That's how you'll learn. When you look at the Getting Started section, there are some slides, some screenshots. Actually, in these screenshots, we are showing work we did with a real company based on the island of Java in Indonesia. They make upscale furniture from sustainably harvested hardwood furniture, and as you can see in this supply chain right there, they then ship to customers around the world. We worked with them to analyze their supply chain and figure out how to expand it to support growing sales, which is always a good problem to have, but still not just let the expanded transportation cost eat up all of their extra revenue. So when you scroll through here, the next thing you're going to see is these 4 entities. Everything, the central idea is that every supply chain simple or complex, anywhere in the world, is modeled with combinations of these four entities. And we'll show that as we get in and start using the simulation. So obviously you can have many kinds of these four entities. You define them, you place them on a map of the world, like what has been done here with the Java Furniture Company. And what you have is a mathematically rigorous model without you having to, stare a differential equation in the face. The math is behind the user interface, but it is very, very rigorous, and this isn't just a toy. As you can see here, there are real companies that are using it to model real supply chains, and everything that works in these simulations will also work in the real world. So although the case study we're going to start with here is pretty simple, even that will be surprising. So like I say, in the getting started, check out these. What it says here is just scroll further down, look at the introduction to the supply chain simulation, which is a sequence of screenshots and some little text underneath it, which I think is going to start to introduce you into this notion of how we combine the four entities and put them on the map. And then come back, look at these video tutorials. A lot of people tell me all they do is look at the video tutorials, and they're good, and I believe them. The tutorials, the first one is about 10 minutes long, and the next two are each about 4 minutes long. I kind of a slower learner, so what I've done is this, if you look at some of the other ones, you'll see that really it's just going into more depth on what you saw in the initial 3 videos. So check through that. I won't go through all that because you can do that on your own. But also do click on the FAQs. And when you look at these FAQs, there only are 7 of them, not 13 or 28, just 7. But I guarantee that all of you will encounter at least one of them and probably several of them. And if you check out the FAQs, you'll know what to do. If you don't, it'll lead, again, to endless hours of puzzling, which will then start to veer into frustration. And then once again, you're going to say unkind things about the app, and it needn't be so. So look at that. There is also the bug report. We are aware of 3 bugs, and we have found and squashed a lot of bugs over the years. These are the last 3. They're burrowed way into the code, and at some point you just kind of wonder how much digging can we do to find them. But for each of the 3 bugs, we do show a workaround. None of the bugs are in the simulation logic. All of them are in the logic that presents the data from the simulations. So there is nothing here that is critical to the simulations themselves, but you should be aware of them. And then there's some points to remember. For instance, if any of you, and I believe that you guys are your semester, when you purchase your access, we default to 90 days. If your semester is longer than 90 days, let us know, and we'll extend your access to cover your entire semester. When you're on your account screen, here's a little, we show you where to look to see what your expiration date is, so you can tell right away if you need more time. And what we say is send an email to info@SCM Globe. Tell us your name, your school, your end date, and we'll extend it for you. All right.
Can I jump in here, Michael?
Pardon? Yes, go ahead.
Please, everyone, I can tell you, you're going to run out of the 90 days. Don't let it get to the end of the semester, because we had a nightmare last year with people who didn't do exactly the step he just described. And we got to the end of the semester, and I spent 3 days with you, Michael, going back and forth on different
Yes, and everyone was unhappy, and we don't want you to be unhappy. So
he's telling you right now, it's going to happen because it's a 90-day term. So you guys can go ahead and just send that email as soon as possible, because our finals are like the week of between the 7th and the 11th, I think, is when the finals will be. So okay. I'm pretty sure the 7th and 8th will be when the decks will be presented. So please make sure and send that email as early as possible, and just get it through, say May 10th or whatever. You should be fine.
And you'll know that we got it, because as it shows here, you can look. You should see your expiration date gets moved up, and again, right here on, and I'll show you But that's why the FAQs, the getting started in the FAQs are the concentrated essence without any wasted time of what you need to know. And so going through that, you'll be good, and the rest you can learn as you go along. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to log on. I just did log on, and on my my screen here, no, my account expires on never. The day I die, it will expire. But you will all see right here when your account expires, and you don't need to purchase more time because you've already purchased your license for this semester. So we'll just extend it. When you are, and there are only 3 screens in the entire application. There is this account management screen, and then there is a screen where you edit your supply chain model, and then the other screen where you run the simulation to see how well that model works. Then, of course, you can save your models and send them to Carey, send them to other people you're working with. You can download and send copies of your model to anybody else who has an account on SCM Globe, and they can then upload that, run it, change it, make some changes, send it back to you. So we have people who are working in geographically dispersed teams who are doing just that. What I'm going to do is and always when you're in the application, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the navigation buttons. When you look, you're going to see one called View Library. So if you click on View Library, you will see all of the libraries that are in the online, or all of the case studies that are in the online library. And then each of these also have an introduction in the online guide, and I'll show you that in a minute. So to start with Cincinnati, or any of the other ones, if you want to import a copy of this into your account, you click on the Import button, give it a name, and any name will do. I'll just call this Mike's Case, Mike's Case number 9. And when I say save, it will copy a version of that, save it to my account. If I go back to my account, I'll see it. There it is, Mike's Case number 9. And now I'm going to edit it, which shows me how the supply chain is currently structured. I'll run it to find problems, and then I'll start making some changes to fix the problems. So I'm going to click on Edit, and what it does is it paints a copy of the supply chain on a map of the world, and that map is Google Maps. So everything you know about Google Maps, you can use that knowledge here. Plus, obviously, we've laid a lot of logic on top of that to allow the modeling and the simulation. And whenever you click on the Help button, it will open up another tab. And here's the online guide. Earlier, you had gone through getting started in the FAQs. And here is the everything you ever want to know. But it is, again, very carefully, hopefully logically and clearly divided up into smaller bite-sized pieces, so you don't have to read everything. Just read what you need to know when you need to know it. Start your case, when you start working on a case like Cincinnati or any of these other ones here. I think, Carey, you mentioned that your class might start working with S&J Trading. Did I hear that or not?
No, we're creating our own.
Okay, all right. Okay, so, well, it's even better that you're creating your own, because then you're really taking it in your hands and making it, using it. So with Cincinnati, everything you need to know to start creating your own supply chain, you'll learn by working with Cincinnati. There is an introduction to Cincinnati, and since this is the case that almost everybody starts with, we've gotten a lot of feedback over the years, and we've tried to cut out the unclear language and the unnecessary words. Everything in here we've worked it over many times to make it clear, to the point. So again, this is also worth a read, and it will outline 3 challenges to start, and then after that, Carey is going to tell you what to do, and because everybody, you can use it in many different ways. But the first challenge is simply to get your supply chain to run for 30 days. We have deliberately built 3 pitfalls into this initial Cincinnati Seasonings model, and you'll stumble over them fairly quickly. You can do any number of things to fix them. This is not a multiple choice test. You literally can do just about anything you could imagine. Some things do work better than others, and there is very objective reporting that will show you how well your ideas work. So obviously the idea is you keep.
That changed the man.
Pardon?
Don't change the man.
Yes.
I said,
Well,
don't change the
here, and as you get towards the bottom, there is a section called, there are a few things you should not do. Now, it's not that the software is going to prevent you, because when you start modeling your own supply chain, or when people are using this to model their own real company's supply chain, you do whatever you need to do to match reality. When you're working with the cases, though, don't reduce product demand. Students have figured out that you can make a supply chain run forever at almost zero cost if you make the demand zero, because then you don't have to deliver anything. And it's true. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. It's just that means you've killed the company in order to hold down your supply chain costs, which is, it's like killing the patient in order to get over the common cold. They did get over the cold, but they're dead now. So that's why it makes no sense. Don't increase on-hand inventory amounts. Don't increase or decrease. You can game the system by just arbitrarily. What you're seeing with Cincinnati Seasonings is, imagine that you just got hired. Your predecessor did the best job that they could, and they weren't up to taking it to the next step, and that's where you step in. So you've inherited a bit of a mess. There's no doubt about that. But again, you could game the system by just arbitrarily increasing or decreasing on-hand amounts. In the reality, the world of logistics, as they will always tell you, inventory doesn't just appear or disappear unless, of course, someone is stealing it. But assuming they're not, so you can't just change things, and then don't change the defaults at first. Just accept the defaults. Ask Carey before you make changes. So those are the things that you really should not do. Other than that, anything that isn't specifically prohibited is allowed. I like that. Instead of only listing what I can do, we only list 3 things you shouldn't do, and everything else, have at it. So with that, if you look at your model, and you could maybe divide your screen into one window where you're seeing my my screen, and then go ahead and log on to your account at SCM Globe and kind of follow along as we're doing this. That I think that would help. When you look at your model, here are the 4 entities listed in this accordion menu on the right side. Products, we only have 1 just to keep things simple in this beginning case. So it is the Spicy Cube, Cincinnati Seasonings, loosely based on reality. If anyone has been to the fine city of Cincinnati, you know that they have a dish known as Cincinnati style chili, which is not like regular chili. And it has a certain taste which is delivered through a blend of spices. This company makes those spices. They ship a product which is a mix of all the different spices that they make, and they ship it in a pallet-sized shipping container. Its price is $1,000. Its weight here is 40 kilograms, and it's 1 cubic meter in size. When we click on facilities, we can see all the 5 facilities, and you see them right there on the map too. So if I want to know more about that, I'm going to close that box there. If I want to know more about the Fort Wayne store, for instance, I just click on it, click on Fort Wayne, and it opens up and shows me a little dialog box, and I can see some stuff about Fort Wayne. So things like the storage capacity at the store, the rent I'm paying, my operating costs, which is essentially my non-rent, labor, utilities, stuff like that. And then I can see the Spicy Cube, the demand per day is 20. We have 800 on hand. As initially, just accept everything as it is. As you start to work with the simulation, you'll have to come back and start making some changes to some of these things. So I won't do anything. I'll just leave that be. Now, if I want to look further and see the vehicles and the routes, all vehicles are assigned to facilities and all routes are assigned to vehicles. So it's kind of a hierarchy there. If I click on a facility where I have vehicles and routes that originate, I can see that on the map. When I clicked on Fort Wayne, I just see Fort Wayne. I don't see anything, so I know no trucks at Fort Wayne, no trucks in Indianapolis, no trucks in Louisville, DC, aka distribution center. I can see there's obviously some vehicles there. I can see delivery routes. We're using what is known as a hub and spoke model, which is a pretty standard distribution pattern where you put all the big trucks at a central location, which is your distribution center, and you concentrate your inventory there. And then the spokes are the delivery routes where the trucks run out and drop off the product at the stores. Once I have selected a vehicle or a facility where there are vehicles, I can click on vehicle and I can see in this case we've got 4 trucks. If I click on a truck, it'll tell me, it'll open up a dialog box and tell me about that truck. You'll note that a lot of these things, a lot like the facilities, we have a drop down. We could change that. We're not going to do that for now, but again, same here. I can change my vehicle. They will all behave differently as they do. I'll just leave it alone for now, but I can see that this truck, for instance, is a small truck. Its carry volume is 40, and because I made the spicy cube 1 cubic meter, I know I can fit 40 of those cubes into this particular small truck. Here's how fast it's going. Here's its operating cost. Carbon can be measured or not. Don't need to worry about that. The delay between departure means this truck will run its route, and I can see it's going to run down to Louisville. It will come back to the DC. It will wait for 20 hours here, and then it'll run it again. If I want to know what is the route itself, I've selected the vehicle. Now I can see every vehicle can have one, must have one or more, can have more than one route. I can see this particular truck, this small truck, we can see that the round trip distance here is 342.35 kilometers. We can see it's taking about 3.8 hours, about 4 hours to run down there and back. I can see when it goes down there, it's dropping off 20 of the spicy cube. So right there, we went through the 4 entities and showed how they created one of the segments in the supply chain. It's the segment that runs down to Louisville. And we've just done that for the other segments of the supply chain. So that's how you have created your model of the supply chain. And now to see, well, how does this run? How well is this going to operate? All I have to do is click on that button in the upper right where it says simulation. And I will do that. And it's going to open up another browser tab, which will run my simulation. So from here out, I'm going to have two browser tabs that I'm going to flip back and forth. There's my edit browser tab, and it says edit right there because sometimes you get a little confused or they're somewhat similar. And here's the simulate tab, and it says simulate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that simulation. I look in the upper right, I click on the play button, and it starts to play. Now, like I said, we've deliberately built some pitfalls, which pretty early on will cause trouble and cause you to get engaged in figuring out what should we do. So here's the first one, not enough storage capacity in Fort Wayne. Click OK, and sometimes you'll run into more than one problem, but as soon as you click OK in the error box, they'll list them all. They'll all be there, in the lower right of your screen. So we think that it's a great idea to leave the simulation tab open so you can always see the results of your last run as you go back to your edit tab and start to make some fixes to solve that problem. And as it says here in the online guide, the introduction to the Cincinnati seasonings case, in the first go around, your first challenge is make it run for 30 days without breaking and do whatever you need to do. As they say in business, throw money at the problem. Your goal is make it run for 30 days. So don't agonize when you're not sure what to do. The answer is try something and see what the simulation tells you. That's how you'll learn. The more you try, the more you will learn. So what we're going to do, in the interest of just trying something, keeping it super simple, if we ran out of space, then one obvious answer is add more space. I could do other things, like I could deliver less product, or I could pick up product and take it back, or I could do anything that isn't specifically prohibited. So what I'm going to do is I'll close out those boxes. And our problem was happening in the Fort Wayne store. So I'm going to go to facilities. I'm going to click on Fort Wayne, and here it is. I can see that I have, for my storage capacity is 850 cubic meters. Well, what if I just add 1,600? Now my rent's going to go up, obviously, but we can always circle back and start to fine tune that. So we're gonna stay focused on getting it to run for 30 days. So I added more capacity. Remember always to click update. If you don't click update, it won't update. And then I just go back to my simulation tab, or as we call it, the sim tab, and I click now that button instead of play because I made changes to my model. So reload that supply chain. We're going to synchronize the changes we just made with the supply chain model, sync that up with the simulation, and then run it and see what happens. So we'll click play again. And you might imagine we've probably solved our problem for the time being in Fort Wayne. If I go down to Fort Wayne, see what's happening. You know, we're still getting a lot of inventory out there, but we've added more space. You know, where we only used to have 850, and now right about there we'd be bumping into it. We're good. We don't have to worry about that. But as I click through, I can see what else is going on. Where you see lines going up, it means we're delivering or making more than we're consuming. Where you see lines going down, it means the opposite. We're consuming more than we are delivering or making, like this, Louisville. And not a surprise to see that we have run out of product in Louisville. When I look at what's going on there, you know, my on-hand inventory graph shows me that I'm clearly not delivering enough to Louisville to keep up with daily demand. I can look at some of the other stores. I can see, like Indianapolis, for instance, we're delivering more than we really need. Fort Wayne, obviously, we got a lot of product out there in Fort Wayne. All right, so here's my problem. I have run out of Spicy Cube in Louisville. I'm going to go back to my edit screen. Now, I know just because of the way I've set up this model, not because it's, you know, etched in stone or anything, but I used a hub and spoke model. I put my trucks, my delivery trucks, I put them at the distribution center. So if I want to get more product down to Louisville, now I could just say, you know, I'm going to hire a truck in Louisville and have that truck run up to Cincinnati and get product and then run back. You can try anything you want. We're going to just say, well, let's check out what's happening first at the DC. So I'm going to click on the DC. Then I'm going to click on the vehicles. And as I recall, we got 2 trucks actually running down there. I'll click through there and find out where are these trucks going. So truck 2, for instance, is, move that out of the way, is going to Louisville. Truck 3 is going out to Indianapolis. I can see that there. Truck 4, what I see is truck 4 is, I'm going to close that out. You can close any of the boxes except for the entity you're actually working on. So I see that that's you know, going to Indy up to Fort Wayne and back, and then truck 1 is also going down to Louisville. So I got 2 trucks running down there. How come I'm running out of product? I see that truck 1 here is a small truck. It could only hold 40 even if I maxed it out. And the other truck, what is the other truck? Truck 2, also a small truck, could only hold 40. So even if I max out both trucks, I can only get 80 in, you know, down there. And I could have the trucks run more frequently. I could, you know, instead of delay between departure of 20, I could say, well, you know, make it 10 or make it 4 or just, you know, whatever I want. Then the question is, well, would running small trucks several times a day be more cost effective than running one big truck once a day? Well, I'm going to guess that I could try, I could see, but I'm going to say, well, I think maybe running one big truck once a day is going to be a better solution. So I'm going to make this. I'm going to say, make it a big truck. So we just made it a big truck. Now you can see the volume. I can carry a lot more product. Of course, my cost has gone up as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update that. So truck number 2 now is a big truck. I'm going to take a look at the delivery route for that truck. And where in the past we were only delivering 20, well, let's deliver 100. Because if I look on my sim screen and I open up Louisville, I can see my demand there in Louisville is 100. So this truck is big enough. Let's put 100 on there. I'm going to do that. Where I was only delivering 20, well, I'm going to type over that. I'm going to say deliver 100. Make it happen. So I'm going to update that. And I don't even need that other truck. So if I go back here and I look at truck number 1, was the other small truck. I don't even need that truck. Why not just remove that truck, save a little money there. I'm going to click, I've highlighted that truck. I'm going to click on the remove button and I will remove it. So now I've made some changes in response to what I found in the last simulation. I flip over to my sim screen again. I click on reload that supply chain, and we reload it, and we run it again. And what we're doing is we're kind of combing out the knots in this supply chain. First, we're finding them, then we're making some fixes, and then as we start to get into this more and get a handle on how is this whole supply chain working, we'll find ways to even make these fixes more efficient. So, and again, as we flip through, like if I look at some of these other tabs, vehicles, I can see my running costs day by day as we run. If I click on products, I can see where the products are in the supply chain, what facilities are housing them. Look for the big numbers. Look for the big numbers and the little numbers. Those are usually where the interesting things will happen. Console will give me everything, and I'll show you that because we can download that, but we'll wait until we generate a little bit more data on that. So, not enough storage capacity in the factory, and that was the last deliberately planted, uh, you know, problem in this supply chain. But depending on what you've done, and I've done some things very quickly, you could do anything you want. I can't emphasize enough. This is not a multiple choice test. Try things. The answer is always, well, what is the best practice? What did you just hear in your lecture? What did you just read in the reading this week? Try stuff. You'll develop what is known as street smarts, and it's a combination of street smarts and science, and we are developing both. So right now, I need more capacity in that seasonings factory. Open question to the group. What should I do? I'm back to the edit screen. What am I going to do to get past this third problem I just found? Anyone want to type in an answer into the chat box? Answers. What would anyone think for 10 points of extra credit? Yes, you could increase production. Yes. Increase truck between factory. Yes. Let's take a look. If I go back to my sim screen and I take a look here at the factory, my on hand is going up. When I look at the seasonings DC, on hand is going down. So I could just add more product, or I could add more space at the factory, but that would cost more rent. Why not? Since I want to move my product to the DC anyway, that's where I concentrate it, and from there it gets pulled out of the DC and delivered to the stores. Let's do that. So when I zoom in, and if I click on the factory, go back to my edit screen, so I can see that there is a vehicle based at the factory, and I can see a little bit about it if I click on factory truck number 1. So I see it's a medium-sized truck. It's a shuttle truck just buzzing back and forth between the factory and the DC. Delay between departure is 8 hours. Its delivery route, when I take a look at that, it's literally taking like a third of an hour. So 20 minutes to buzz up there and back at the speed that I have defined on that vehicle. When it does, it's dropping off 30 every time it runs up to the factory or up to the DC. It's running about 3 times, in a 24-hour day. So it's moving about 90 a day from the factory to the DC, and I can see my production at the factory is 350. So yeah, I'm getting a build up there. Let's again, I could adjust production at the factory. I could make it lower, or I could deliver more out to the. I could start delivering directly from the factory out to the stores and do stuff like that. Again, the answer is, well, what was the relevant best practice that you read? What do you think makes sense? Try it and see what happens. So let's do this. instead of just a medium truck, let's make it a large truck so we can get more product on there. And we'll update that. And then when we take a look, we'll select that truck and we'll take a look at the delivery route. Instead of just dropping off 30, we can max out that truck. We could carry 110. If I try to overload the truck, like put 300 in there, just cram it in there. I don't care what you do, cram it in. If I try to do that, it will just say you've overloaded the truck. This here says your carry volume, you're trying to carry 300, it only carries 110. This vehicle will be overloaded from the get-go. Try a different idea. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to make it 110. And we'll update that, and then we'll go back and we'll run it, and we'll see what happens. Now, I'm not giving anything away. The solutions we're coming up with here are one among many, and they're not the most efficient solutions either, but they work. And you will find the most efficient solutions by just playing around, trying it. Memorizing answers in a high change, unpredictable world is a losing strategy. Answers have a shelf life of about a week these days. So I'm going to go and I'm just going to reload that supply chain. So this is that sense now, and you're probably all feeling a little bit overwhelmed, which is to be expected, but it will start to click. And actually I can even run this a little faster. I can make my sim run even faster. The more you play with it, and actually the more we're running it faster in the interest of time, but when you run it more slowly and you click through and see what's going on, think of water flowing through a network of pipes. That's what a supply chain is. And you want to always deliver the product whenever it is needed, never run out of product when the customer asks for it, but do so at the lowest price and the lowest amount of on-hand inventory. And that is the simple goal of every supply chain in the world, at least most of them. 98.9% of them, but it's a whole lot easier said than done. And so at this point, we once again run out of storage at the factory. But when I look and see it, when I scroll over here, I can see, we did actually run out to 35 days. So 30 days was the goal. We hit our 30-day target. We made it happen. It does run for 30 days. I live in Chicago, and several years ago, the White Sox had this motto of winning ugly. We won ugly here. We got to run for 30 days, but it's not a great solution. But that's just the opening. You're just starting. Now let's try one other thing, and then Carey, are there some questions that maybe we should pause and answer questions?
Yeah, there was one question. The question was, so whenever we model something, it's going to start from day one. The answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
Each time you put in information, new information, it's going to go back to the original model and try to run it for as long as it can. And
go ahead. Well, there's a reason for that. There's a best practice in the business, and all the professional societies, logistics societies, APICS and CSCMP, all advocate something known as S&OP, Sales and Operations Planning, where you get people who are from different areas of the company, finance, marketing, sales, production, logistics, get them all together, and you come up with an operating plan for the next 30 days. What that means is that you need to have a plan beforehand that should probably get you through 30 days. No one is going to be surprised if it doesn't exactly, but at least it is a reasonable plan. The other side of that is just running and gunning and winging things and trying stuff. And plenty of companies get to that point, often under stress, where you don't really know what you're doing, and every day there's a problem, and you just throw money at the problem. You react. People have said, well, gee, I would like to just, I got to day 15, and now I'd like to just kind of make some changes and keep on going. But it defeats the purpose, because that would be a cool game, but we want this to be fun, but this isn't entirely a game, because you are coming up with a 30-day plan, not a 15-day plan, and then an 8-day plan, and then another 12-day plan to kind of get you across the finish line. You do want a straight shot that if the world, is reasonably predictable. And in a 30-day period, it is reasonable to think that you might actually get a handle on things. which is also why you do not come up with 90-day. People say, well, I got my supply chain to run for 90 days. Isn't that better than a 30-day one? And the answer is, well, I'm sure you learned stuff and you worked at it, but it's not really, because you would never do that in the real world anymore. There's too much unpredictability, and 90-day, I mean, strategy, yeah, you come up with a year or a 2-year strategy, but we're talking here about running a supply chain, which is kind of a month-to-month proposition, but it's not just completely running and gunning and just making it up as you go. You do start with 30-day plans. So that's the reason why 30 days is the goal, and you do want to figure something out that would work for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, typically your companies are doing rolling 30-day forecasts. So at the end of this 30-day forecast, you could do everything from change production scheduling to delivery routes. You may have added new customers, added new products, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I'm seeing here we have many variables to deal with, and you do, and yet also remember, always remember, that it is only the 4 entities. You're always working with the 4 entities. It is not just a list as long as your arm of somehow related but completely impenetrable variables. You got 4 entities, and the variables relate to one of the 4 entities. And a change in one will trigger changes in others. We've had students say, well, what a hassle. I can't just focus on reducing transportation costs without worrying about whether I'm going to run out of product in my stores. That is right. That is precisely right. And it would do you no good to train you how to reduce transportation costs without considering the repercussions, because you wouldn't know anything that anyone would want to hire you for then anyway. And so as you play with this, you'll develop a mental model. You'll develop this sense. And that's what we keep talking about, the science and the street smarts. You cannot just work on science alone, and you cannot just work on street smarts. One or the other alone is just going to get you into trouble. It's that marvelous blend of science and street smarts. And what we're doing here is, like, if we go back right here where we did generate a lot of data, we have, if I click on export results to Excel, we got data. You want data. We got data. And you can analyze it 7 ways from Sunday, and you should. Open that up a little bit. So what you can see, now we ran for 35 days, so by day, by facility, I can see my on hand. Here's the amount of product I had on hand. And the reason we show this is I will also show you some templates where you can load this and start to create profit and loss reports, monthly profit and loss reports, which the finance guys at any company are going to be all over those P&L reports. Every 30 days, they want to see the P&Ls. And I can see, so there's a lot of different kinds of data that come out of the simulation. I can see what my demand is. We hold demand steady over those 30 days. Production, we also hold production steady. In the real world, there will be some variability in all of those, but it will be plenty challenging without that. We can see what comes in to our facilities. We can see what goes out. These are cumulative numbers, so you can subtract one from the other to get your dailies. I can see, again, these are cumulative numbers, my facility costs. So what we're seeing now is a lot of information. And Carey, are your students going to be using the P&L template?
The P&L template, I'm not sure I'm familiar with that.
Oh, all right, because I thought some of your folks from the fall, but what we have is in the introduction, there's there's a lot of data here that we don't want to overwhelm you with. So we have links. The links are scattered. There's a lot of repetition in the online stuff, which is part of how you learn, just repeating stuff. But if I click on analyzing simulation data, there is an explanation of how to interpret what's on your screen here. And again, I won't read that because you can read it. These are some shots from another case study where we have 3 products, but you learn to read the upward and downward sloping lines. They all mean something. They are not random. They all mean something, and changes will reflect. You'll see changes you make in delivery schedules and delivery amounts, and et cetera. You'll see the changes in the pattern and the slope of your on-hand curve. If you keep going down, there's a little discussion here about how to download simulation data to reporting templates. And if this is not going to be used, I don't want to muddy the water. But it is a very objective way to measure the results that you get. So we show you how to take the data, and then here's a for instance, taking the data that came out of one of the simulation runs and plugging it in here. This is something that the accountants would just love. And we also have some supply chain performance, some KPIs, key performance indicators, and so you can. It's a way of comparing different solutions, because like I said, all solutions are not created equal.
Yeah. And then your question is, we will. This is actually the use of these P&Ls are what defines the quality of the simulation that you run. That Amar and Ashley have both asked about. You can change a gajillion things and reduce and get it to run for 30 days. But what about the impact to cost? Well, this is where that comes in. So when you run the simulation and you say, okay, I want to run a simulation and I want it to, and we talked about the science meeting the street. Yeah, you could make it run for 30 days a lot of different ways. But when you run the P&L, and this is the last slide that I want to see in your presentation, which shows me your performance for the supply chain. When I look at that, based on what you determined was the optimal solution for the supply chain for Cincinnati Seasonings, it'll give me these costs associated with it. And that will allow me to understand, okay, what changes did you make and what was the impact? That's why you'll constantly tweak it. You'll make a change and get it to run for 30 days. And then when you run the numbers, you'll say, okay, well, what my goal for this project is tweak it to the point where you think you've got enough and then turn it in. I'm not as interested in that you get every nickel saved. What I'm more interested in is that you go through the process, especially for Cincinnati, because I want to make sure you all understand how the tool works and what needs to happen to make it as quality a use of the tool as you can. Because in the real world, any change in the supply chain will obviously have an impact to cost. And it's not enough to just make changes to get it run for 30 days with no inclination on what the cost impact will be. And does that answer the question that's being asked? Okay.
So
I'm not a doctor yet. Not until all right. I have 3 months left.
3 of the hardest months, I would imagine.
Yes, I'm finishing the dissertation.
One of the things that people will tell you, for instance, is, and you'll see it in the readings and the lecture, your inventory days of supply, turn and earn, they say in the distribution business, where basically, you don't want to have a lot of inventory sitting around, because then the money you use to buy the inventory is all tied up in stock, and the stock might get stolen, damaged, or become obsolete, and then your money suddenly is your money is lost if your stock becomes worthless. So you want to turn over the stock as quickly as you can. Plus, the more stock you have on hand, the more inventory you have to, more storage space, etc. So look at, for instance, just as a for instance, when I look at the Fort Wayne store, which we know has a whole boatload of inventory, way too much. Look, it's got 55.85 days of supply on hand. And when I look at the store itself, it's losing money. When I look at the other two stores, their days of supply on hand are much more reasonable, and even they could be skinnied down a little bit more, but they're profitable. And so overall, this company this month lost $1.5 million, give or take. It will turn out that you do need to increase revenue as well as decrease costs, and you increase revenue by adding more stores. And as you add more stores, you will simply, right now, this accommodates the first 3 stores that are there in the supply chain when you first load it from the library, but you'll start to add more stores, and let's take a look at that. Because you can't save your way to greatness. I've had many arguments with chief finance officers. You can't save your way to greatness. I would sometimes win, but never when they were my boss, actually. And so you have to both save money and increase revenue. And when we take a look at the introduction here, so the first challenge, which we rose to that challenge, we've got to run for 30 days. Now the next challenge will be add more stores and then still keep the supply chain running for 30 days. And then as you look on to the third challenge, which will be now keep that whole extended supply chain running and lower your transportation and your operating costs, reduce on inventory. And that is essentially the central challenge in every supply chain. Easy to say, hard to do. And every time the world changes, you have to adjust your supply chain. So if this was easy, well, they wouldn't need us then, would they? So if we want to start to add some new supply chains or some new stores, in the introduction here, it says that we know there's going to be one in Chicago. We have an actual address. We have some information about, the marketing folks did their job. They've projected demand here to be 100 a day. We'll open that store with 300 on hand. We'll have a storage capacity of 5. And then in Columbus, we'll open up a smaller store. The VP of Sales tells us that the new Chicago store gives us an actual address right there. And I live in Chicago, and this store isn't more than a few blocks away, actually. So in the interest of being realistic, and I think it adds a lot more depth, and I think it even makes it more fun, because when you start to, you'll get to pick your own location for the store in Columbus, but there's some qualifications, like you don't just plunk a store down in the middle of a golf course, for instance, unless you're selling cold beer. And so we have an address. They gave us an address for the Chicago store, and if you look in the upper left corner, it says search location, so I can type that in. It was 1840 North Clybourne, and there it is. So I'm going to click on that, and it takes me right there. A Trader Joe's today, but they're going to lose their lease, and we've already snapped up that terrific retail location. And if I click over to satellite, I get a view of the actual building, and this is important, and I'll show you why. First of all, I think just because, I don't know, I'm a map geek and I think it's kind of cool. But the real reason is that, again, I can see something about where I'm putting my store, which will tell me what kind of vehicles I can use to deliver my products. Let me first just add that store. So we'll make it a store. We'll just accept the defaults. And then we're going to add products. So I'm going to click on. Wait a minute. I want to do new. What am I doing here? Talking too fast. I'm going to click on new. I'm opened up in the vehicles. I want to be opened up in facilities. So I open the facilities menu. Then I click on new, and we're going to call that the Chicago store. Or you can call it anything you want, of course. But just to remember what it is, especially when you print out the data, it's always good to have meaningful labels on the data that comes down. So Chicago store, and I could make it any kind of facility. I'm going to make it a store right there. Going to add product. And when we looked here, we saw that, or when we looked here online, the demand will be 100. We'll have 300 on hand. Storage capacity is 500. So my demand here is actually going to be 100. So I'm typing over 70 on that. My quantity on hand, I'll open that store with 300. So I have 3 days supply. I'm going to click add. So I add that to the store. Now, if I just try to click save, it'll say, please put that facility on the map. So I'm going to do it. We know it's right there. I'm going to click there. There it is. There's Chicago store. And now I click save. And I'm going to switch back to the map view. So now my question is, I got that store. How do I get products up there to keep it supplied to meet customer demand? And, people say, well, gee, should I send a big truck or a small truck or a helicopter? You can do anything that isn't specifically prohibited. So what I'm going to do first is a little aerial reconnaissance, which is, why that whole visual aspect Maps combined with satellite photos are about as close a representation of the real world as you can get outside of the real world. And when I zoom in, I see, number one, it's what's that? Wait, what's that? What's that pulling out of or backing into the loading dock? Looks to me like a big truck. So therefore, the answer to the question is yes, you can use a big truck. If I had opened my store somewhere else, like perhaps if I'd opened this store in the middle of the loop right downtown, well, no, they don't let big 18-wheelers go cruising up and down those streets without a special permit anyway. So no, I would not be able to if I was down here in the loop. And furthermore, we have the Street View available, which is again part of Google. So I could take a look. I could just jump into the world here and take a look and say, where is that store? Oh yeah, there it is. It's right there. Oh geez, I drove through that guy's store. Anyway, you know what I mean. The point is there is a reason to be able to look around in the world because it'll tell you what you can do supply chain wise. I know I can send a big truck up there, and so I'm going to do that. Otherwise, I might have had to send a bunch of small trucks up there, which might be more expensive, which then leads into a whole thing about opening up a local distribution center and staging inventory up there and opening more stores, etc. You start to realize that it's more than just truck driving and warehousing. There is a method to it all. And what sounds like an abstract best practice, when you try it out in these simulations, it turns out it provides a real good answer. So it's best practice for a reason. So what I'm going to do now is I will, if I click, and again, I could have that vehicle start up in Chicago and run down, but I'll stick with the hub and spoke model that I've been working on. So I'll click on the DC. I'm going to go back to the map view just for a little bit of visual clarity. And I could look at any of the vehicles I already have and see, does one of the vehicles that is already out there running a route, does it have capacity to add more stores onto its route? Like, for instance, this one truck here that just goes up to Indianapolis. It's I can see from the icon, the big red trucks are the big trucks. The little orange and blue trucks are the small and the medium. But so let's take a look. What is going on with that truck? If I click on its route, it's going up to Indianapolis, and I can see that it is dropping off 50, but the truck itself, it looks like it has capacity for 110, the carry volume there, I can see that. It needs 50 already in Indianapolis. I need 100 up there in Chicago. I could only get 60 on here. So maybe I'll just, there's many things I could do, but maybe what I'll do is I'll just create a new truck. So open question, how do I create a new truck? I know all of you guys are thinking the answer, but you're just not typing it into the chat box.
Somebody say click on new.
Yes, exactly. And that's, we want to make the software real easy because the challenges in the supply chain will become progressively more difficult. And I don't want you wasting brain power on a piece of software. So click on new. And then now what you see is I've highlighted the facility where I want to base my truck, because I could highlight Chicago if I wanted to base it up in the Chicago, but I want to be in DC, so I highlight the facility where I want to put that truck, then I open up the vehicles menu, then I click on new, and I am clicking on new, and notice it's not opening it. Oh no, it is opening it. I'm just running a little bit slow here on this side. So because what I was going to say, sometimes when you see things don't seem to be working out, when in doubt, one of the words to the wise in the FAQs is, when in doubt, click screen refresh. Sometimes the server connection between your PC and our servers, which are up in the Amazon Web Services cloud, will get a little bit scrambled. So when in doubt, click on refresh, but otherwise, we are good to go here. So I'm going to call this the Chicago truck. It is a large truck. I want a large truck running up there. So, and then delay between departure. If it was at 0 delay between departure, that would be, the truck would just be a perpetual motion machine. It'd be running up there, dropping off product, coming back down, loading product, running back up. So I'll give the driver a chance to, recuperate. Maybe I'll give it a 12 a 12-hour delay or a 24-hour delay. The frequency that you set, the frequency of deliveries is managed by the delay between departures. So again, you can get more stuff up there by making more frequent deliveries. We all know that. All of this is common sense. It's just that there's a lot of it. There's many different combinations. So it does seem overwhelming sometimes. Now I'm gonna click on Chicago, the truck. Now to create a new route, what should I do for 10 points extra? Okay, yes. Click on new. It's always that way, and every time it'll open up a dialog box. You'll say what you want to do. We'll call this the Cincy to Chicago route. And then now I can send that new truck anywhere I want. I can send it to any of the other facilities if I wish. I want to send it to Chicago, so I've selected Chicago. I click on Add Stop to Route, and it draws in what in our understanding of the world, this looks like the best way to go. But you may very well know something that I do not, or there may be reasons why you don't want to run it through downtown Indy. See where when I put my cursor there, there's that drag and drop. So I could drag and pull that up. It would snap over to a different road if I wanted to do that. But we'll just accept that. It looks pretty good. And now I'm going to assign routes to that product. You never have, just like you would never have a facility without product there, because why would you have a facility without product? And you would not have a vehicle without a route, because there's no reason to have a vehicle if it's not going anywhere. And you never have a route without product, because there's no reason to have a route unless you're delivering something. So,
Yep.
We'll say like 100. It tells me right here the demand is 100, so I'll say, okay, well, we'll deliver 100. See what the heck happens. And then I'm going to click Add. And so now I have created a whole new segment to my supply chain. If I click on browser refresh, it'll redraw the whole supply chain so I can get a sense of it. After you've been working on your supply chain for a while, you often want to just refresh it and take a look and see what happens there. Now, did I actually say save? I'm talking so fast, I don't think I said save. I probably didn't. I often say, wow, there's a bug in the software, and they go, oh yeah, right, I forgot to press save. So we're going to go back to there and just see what the heck I was doing. Chicago.
While you're doing that, I'm going to answer Mark's question.
Yes.
Question on the week by week that's not what I'm looking for on your results. I'm looking for the 3 scenarios that Michael has mentioned. As far as your presentation, showing that, okay, what the challenge was in challenge 1 and how you handled it and what your results were. Same thing for challenge 2, and then finally the same thing for challenge 3. And challenge 3, it's a summary of the supply chain based on the time that you got it to run for the 30-day time frame. Mark, I hope that answers your question. I'm not so much looking, the reports that you generate that you'll put into the deck what can be week-to-week reports, but ultimately it'll be for that 30-day time frame.
Because when you start managing a supply chain, or even get hired on and become part of the team that does the logistics planning for your company, they're going to be looking for rolling 30-day plans, always looking to 30 days. And typically if you're going to be leasing trucks, for instance, or you're going to be leasing extra storage space at a public warehouse, they want a 30-day commitment. Nothing is forever, but 30 days is kind of so that's why we all standardize on 30 days. So now you can see I just refreshed the screen. I did save the route this time, so we can see we've added a new segment onto our supply chain. Now I'm going to flip over to the sim screen. I'll reload that and we'll run it again and we'll see what happens. And what you find is that when you can find a solution with one configuration, and then you change the configuration, and then as you might expect, it could upset the balance, and you'll have to do more tinkering to get it to work again. So I'll click on on play, and as it's playing, we can get a sense of what's going on. The more you do this, the more that intuitive sense, you'll start to understand generally where you should go to make changes, and then you use the data to really fine-tune what you're doing and come up with really good ideas. We often get the question of what's the difference between simulation and optimization, or sometimes people will say, oh, you're doing optimization. And we'll say, no, actually, we're doing simulation, and we generate data that you can then use for optimization. And there's I think, a misunderstanding, because often people will say, well, in my company, we have a computer that will tell us what to do. And my response is, I hope not, because if that is so, well, then they certainly don't need you. And secondly, when you do optimization, it will improve an existing idea. It will improve it beyond what a human being could do by just merely tinkering. But it will never come up with a new idea, and that's a very important but. I could feed all the data into optimization programs, and I have, and they will just tighten it down. They will make my design as efficient as possible, but they will never say, hey, gee, Mike, we thought you might also consider, delivery by rail instead of just trucks. It won't do that. It will optimize my present configuration and tell me everything I need to do about stationing and routing my trucks, but it would never say, hey, why don't you try rail? So that's for the human to do, and doing it in simulation gives you a sense of whether it's a good idea or just a dead end. Very quickly, it'll tell you, am I seeing costs going in the right direction? Okay, I am. Now let's start optimizing it. And we don't do right now beyond the template that, the P&L template, but we are working on some templates that would take data. And for instance, in the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, there's something called the solver, which is pretty cool little add-on that will, give it a bunch of data, and it'll go through and run some linear programming and solve for the most efficient solution. So you can do that. All this data that's coming out of the simulation, you can go and do that. So we can see what is happening here. We're running right along. Are there questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm looking at this question from Mark. I'm wondering which PDF you're referring to, Mark, when you ask about the PDF. Can you click on the microphone and maybe ask the question over the phone or over the computer?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the two files that you provided on the website, it's very descriptive of what you're going over right now on all the pieces. And the first section on it was week 1, you learn it, and then week 2, you just get it to work for 30 days. And then week 3, 4, 5, and I think went all the way down to 14. You fix various problems, and you add 2 new stores and all that. Is that what we're wanting to do, or are we just working in the first week 2, basically, of getting it to run for 30 days?
No, there's 3 challenges. There's week 1, or the first challenge is to get it to run for 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
The second challenge is you're adding the 2 stores. And then the third challenge is you're doing the entire network with the least cost option for both transportation and warehousing.
Okay, but you don't need it in the week breakout like the.
No, exactly. No, I see what you're asking now. No, okay. I don't need it with the week to week output. I need the 3 scenarios answered based on the production. Yeah, that I guess that's one, Michael, I guess you did, or maybe Donnie did, I'm not sure. Yeah, where they broke it down.
Yes, and by week we just meant that it would be 1 week's assignment in your class. It wouldn't mean that it was 1 week of the simulation.
Okay, so
yeah.
So just to confirm, get it to run for 30 days, add the new sites, and then make it cost effective.
Yes.
So on that sequence, do we have to worry like you did today? The first 1 and 2, we don't care about cost at that point, so we just need to just get it working.
That's
and
right.
then third one, focus on price.
You nailed it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what you'll find, Mark, is when you do that and you don't worry about cost in steps 1 and 2, when you start to mess with step 3, you're like, oh God. And you're gonna have a lot of tweaking to do. Yes, it's due on February the 5th.
So, I mean, I could go on longer, but it would be better if you guys have specific questions, and because we are pretty much at the top of the hour. So
yeah, we are past the top of the hour. So yeah, does anyone else have any questions they need to ask Michael? Because this is a great time to ask him if you have them. Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone's attention and attendance, and I hope you got something out of the study, or out of the presentation. Mike, you did a great job again.
Thank you.
And so I'm confident the team. Now, I will say this about the Milledgeville Mittens. The entire purpose of Milledgeville Mittens, is to actually make it level set with what the project teams are going to work on. Because it's not a real world example, Michael, but it's an example that they're going to work through of an existing, or what would be an existing company. And I've purposely set the project up to where there will be gaps and there will be challenges that you run into when you try to do what you've done through the process of Cincinnati seasoning with Milledgeville Mittens. And you'll have to ask questions at a team level to get the answers to the questions that you need. And I did that on purpose because I want you to be able to think about how the supply chain works and the 4 variables that drive it. And if you can't answer those based on the question, on the instructions, then believe it or not, that's actually part of the process, is to be able to understand that. And I'm looking for each team to respond throughout the semester when they're working through their project. So I'm hopeful that, and then at the end, we'll have a apples to apples comparison, and I won't have two. And the reason I did that is because I had some supply chains that were too complex for the tool to handle, and some supply chains that were so generic that they made absolutely no sense, Thomas or Michael. That's why I ended up doing it.
Well, I think it's really good when you build from scratch, because then you really get a sense of how a supply chain works, and this, you'll come away from this course with an intuitive understanding that really you will be surprised. It'll enable you to look at situations, absorb a whole lot more information, make sense of things, and I hope you have a good time. And there is also, if you click on the support ticket here, if you're having technical problems, we don't want a question like, how do I solve this supply chain problem? But if you have a technical problem, fill out that support ticket, click submit. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, usually sooner than that. And we want you to have fun.
I've got a question for Thomas here. Thomas, there is no deliverable on Cincinnati seasoning until February the 5th. Whether you started on it last week or this week is immaterial to me. But on February 5th, the expectation is you'll be able to solve the 3 scenarios that are laid out in the Cincinnati seasoning case. So,
thank you.
All right, everyone. I appreciate your time. Y'all have a good evening. Thanks, Michael.
Okay. Good night, all.
All right.
Good night. Thank you.